In the shadow of an emperor who ruled for only 99 days rose sons who shaped the destiny of an empire. This is the story of legacy, power, and ambition, of how the heirs of Friedrich III inherited not only a throne, but a world on the brink of transformation.
Wilhelm II was a controversial emperor who caused mayhem and chaos around him. Though he had a great love for his homeland, he was not an effective ruler and plunged Germany into war. Wilhelm II was the first child of Victoria, Princess Royal and German Empress, and her husband, Friedrich III, German Emperor. Wilhelm was born after a difficult labour on the 27th of January 1859. He was born in the breech position and was forcibly removed from the birth canal. His traumatic birth resulted in a tear of the brachial plexus of his left arm, leaving him with Erb's palsy. He also suffered from a lack of oxygen at birth, leaving him with mild brain damage. His left arm became his mother's obsession. She wanted Wilhelm to be a strong heir and felt his disability reflected badly on her. In her pursuit to cure her son, she damaged her relationship with him. Twice a week, Wilhelm's arm was placed inside the body of a freshly slaughtered hare. The idea was that the warm blood would transfer health and vitality to the arm. This did not work and was very traumatic for the child. As he learned to crawl and walk, Wilhelm's right arm was tied behind his back. It was hoped that this would force him to use his left arm and he would have to work up strength. Instead, the toddler was unable to use his arms at all, and it caused him great distress. Wilhelm was also subjected to electrotherapy almost every day. None of these supposed treatments worked and caused Wilhelm to despise his parents. Wilhelm was tutored at home by Georg Hinspeter. After this, Wilhelm was educated at the Friedrichs Gymnasium and finished his formal education in 1877. He then spent 4 years at the University of Bonn studying law and politics. From a young age, Wilhelm was exposed to the military environment of the Prussian court. It did much to frame his ideals and relationships. Wilhelm idolized his grandfather, Wilhelm I. He had a distant relationship with his mother due to her treatment of him as a child. After frequent attempts by his parents to educate him in liberalism, he became alienated from them, suspecting them to be putting Britain, his mother's homeland, before Prussia. At 21, Wilhelm joined the military, being assigned to the rank of lieutenant of the 1st Regiment of Foot Guards. He reported that he found a family amongst the soldiers. During this time, he was influenced by Chancellor Otto von Bismarck against his parents, who opposed Bismarck and his policies. Wilhelm soon grew to hate Britain for supposedly killing his father. Wilhelm fell in love with his first cousin, Elizabeth of Hesse, but she turned him down. He eventually married Augusta Victoria of Schleswig-Holstein instead, on the 27th of February 1881, and they remained married until her death in 1921. During their marriage, they had 7 children together: Wilhelm, Otto Friedrich, Adalbert, August Wilhelm, Oscar, Joachim, and Victoria Louise. 1888 became known as the Year of 3 Emperors. In March 1888, Wilhelm's grandfather, Wilhelm I, died, and his father became Friedrich III. He was dying from throat cancer and died in June of that year. Wilhelm ascended the throne as German Emperor and King of Prussia. After becoming Kaiser, Wilhelm soon grew impatient with Bismarck, opposing his foreign policies. Wilhelm wanted to expand the German Empire and was determined to rule as well as reign. Wilhelm was content to allow Bismarck to handle the day-to-day administration. As time went on, Wilhelm became more interested in social issues of the day and argued for better treatment of workers. He was in favour of pro-labor unions, but Bismarck opposed this opinion, managing to push through anti-socialist laws. Bismarck resigned in 1890 and was succeeded by Leo von Caprivi and then Chlodwig, Prince of Hohenlohe-Schillingsfürst. Hohenlohe was dismissed in 1900 and Wilhelm appointed Bernhard von Bülow to the position. Wilhelm concentrated on the creation of the German Navy. It would rival that of Britain and allow Germany to declare itself a world power. As Kaiser, Wilhelm promoted the arts and sciences and sponsored the Kaiser Wilhelm Society for the promotion of scientific research. He also supported reform of the Prussian education system. Wilhelm had a difficult relationship with many of his relatives, his most difficult being with his British relatives. He craved the acceptance of his British relatives, and while his grandmother, Queen Victoria, treated him with courtesy, many of his other relatives ignored him and didn't accept him. Wilhelm and his uncle Bertie, later King Edward VII of the United Kingdom, did not get along. Bertie treated Wilhelm as a nephew, not as a reigning monarch, and Wilhelm would lord his position as emperor over his uncle. Despite his poor relationship with his British relatives, when he heard his grandmother was dying in January 1901, he travelled to England and was with her when she died. Wilhelm was friends with Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and was shocked by his assassination in June 1914. Wilhelm offered support to Austria-Hungary in crushing the assassins, the Black Hand. The perceived source of the movement was Serbia. Austro-Hungarian ministers and generals convinced the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I to sign a declaration of war against Serbia. Russia mobilized to defend Serbia. Wilhelm saw this as a threat and thought that England, France, and Russia would conspire to destroy Germany. Britain promised to enter the war if Germany attacked France. War soon followed, engulfing Europe. During the war, Wilhelm lost much of his power and took on more honorific duties. The German Empire became a military dictatorship under the control of Field Marshal Hindenburg and General Ludendorff. Nevertheless, Wilhelm still retained the authority to handle matters of political appointment. Support for the Kaiser dissipated by November 1918. Wilhelm was in Belgium when he heard of the uprisings in Berlin. He knew he would have to abdicate, but he still hoped to retain the Prussian kingship. However, this was impossible under the imperial constitution, which tied the Prussian and German crowns together. Wilhelm was forced to abdicate on the 9th of November 1918. Soon, the rest of the German kingdoms, dukedoms, and principalities would eventually abdicate as well. Wilhelm left Germany and went into exile in the Netherlands, where they refused to extradite Wilhelm when requested by several other countries after the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. On the 28th of November 1918, after finally accepting that he had lost his crowns for good, Wilhelm issued a statement of abdication. In exile, Wilhelm married his second wife, Hermine Rose of Guise, after the death of his first wife in 1921. Wilhelm hoped that the successes of the Nazi Party would stimulate interest in the monarchy being restored. Soon, Wilhelm became horrified at the actions of the Nazis, but still held a degree of admiration for them. Wilhelm died of a pulmonary embolism on the 4th of June 1941 and was buried on the grounds of Hoosdorn, where he had lived during his exile. Prince Henry of Prussia was born the 14th of August 1862. He was the third child and second son of Friedrich III and Victoria, Princess Royal. As a baby, Henry was quite restless. As he grew into a toddler, he would cry to be carried around and was quite attached to his mother, Victoria. Victoria found his behaviour difficult to handle. He would often throw tantrums when he did not get his way, and would kick and scratch the maids when they didn't do what he wanted. When he was only 3 years old, Victoria sent him to spend the winter with his maternal grandmother, Queen Victoria, hoping she could help. In 1863, Henry's parents bought a rundown property and refurbished it into a farm, which allowed the family to live a simple country life periodically. During wintertime, Henry and his siblings lived in Berlin, and they spent their summers in Potsdam. Due to his father's position in the Prussian army, Henry's father was often away from home. His mother was strict with her children, expecting them to exhibit moral behaviour. She raised her children in English-style nurseries and fostered a love of her native country in several of her children by incorporating aspects of English culture in the home. Like his older brother Wilhelm, Henry was tutored at home by George Hinspeter, who described Henry as being intellectually slow. As he grew older, Henry became quite good-natured, and most people had something good to say about him. After the deaths of Henry's younger brothers, Sigismund and Waldemar, Victoria indulged her younger children, Victoria, Sophia, and Margaret, while being harsh to her older children, William, Charlotte, and Henry. When Henry was 15, he entered the German Imperial Navy, and over a period of 2 years, he travelled throughout the world as part of his training. He passed his naval official examination in 1880 and attended the German Imperial Naval Academy from 1884 to 1886. Over the course of his naval career, he held several high-ranking positions, including Commander of the Baltic Sea Naval Station, Commander of the High Seas Fleet, and Grand Admiral of the German Imperial Navy. Though Henry and Wilhelm had been close growing up, after Henry joined the Navy, their paths in life diverged, and they were never as close as they were as children. Growing up, Henry fell in love with his first cousin, Irene of Hesse, and she fell in love with him as well. Irene was a grandchild of Queen Victoria, like Henry. On the 24th of May 1888, Henry married Irene. By this point, Henry's father Frederick had become the German emperor, but he was dying from cancer. The marriage was a loving one, and they had 3 sons together: Waldemar, Sigismund, and Henry, named after Henry and his deceased brothers. Unfortunately, Irene had the haemophilia gene. She inherited the gene from her mother, Princess Alice of the United Kingdom. Waldemar and Henry were both haemophiliacs, and both would succumb to their condition. Waldemar died in 1945 during the Second World War after being unable to get a blood transfusion, and Henry died after hitting his head at the age of 4 in 1904. During the First World War, Henry was appointed to Commander-in-Chief of the Baltic Fleet. He successfully prevented the Russian Navy from attacking the German coast. At the end of the war, Henry's brother Wilhelm, Emperor of Germany, abdicated as German Emperor and King of Prussia. Henry left the army following this. Like many members of his family, Henry was forced to flee Germany, and he spent the rest of his life on his family farm near Schleswig. Like his father, Henry died of throat cancer on the 20th of April 1929 at the age of 66. Henry was similar to his father in many ways. Both were good-natured, humble, and trusted easily. Henry also appeared physically similar to Friedrich. Ultimately, Henry lived the life that his brother, the former Kaiser, secretly desired. A happy marriage with an intelligent, supportive wife, a fulfilling career, and a loving relationship with his English relatives. Born on the 15th of September 1864 in Potsdam, Prussia, Sigismund had a close relationship with his mother Victoria. Sigismund's older siblings were not allowed to be breastfed on the orders of his paternal grandmother, Queen Augusta of Prussia. They were fed by wet nurses. By the time Sigismund was born, Victoria had enough self-confidence to defy Augusta and breastfeed Sigismund herself. Perhaps it was this experience of finally having some say in the care of her children that fostered a special closeness between the mother and son. In a letter Victoria wrote to one of her mother's ladies-in-waiting, she wrote about how happy she was with Sigismund and that she truly loved him much more than she did for her eldest 3 children. As he became a toddler, Victoria thought he would grow up to be cleverer and more intelligent than her other children. However, Sigismund would never grow old. On the 4th of June 1866, during the Austro-Prussian War, Sigismund's father was fighting on the front lines. Most of the doctors were taken to the front lines as well to heal wounded and ill soldiers. The day after Friedrich left, Sigismund became quite fretful, more so than usual, and soon he was unable to eat or sleep. After one day, he could no longer stand nor walk. Because the usual doctors that cared for the family were not available, Victoria was forced to consult doctors unknown to her. They gave her the terrible news that her son had meningitis. At the time, there was no curative treatment, or any kind of treatment really, for meningitis, and death was almost guaranteed. Sigismund began to convulse, and he died on the 18th of June 1866 at only 21 months of age. His death had a profound effect on Victoria, and she never recovered. She wrote of the pain of seeing her son suffer a fate so cruel and how much it haunted her. Friedrich was informed of Sigismund's death by his mother, Queen Augusta, who personally went to the front line to deliver the bad news. He was given permission to return home for the funeral, but refused to do so, stating that it was his duty to serve his homeland and that he could not be absent from his job. Understandably, Victoria could not comprehend this and was inconsolable at the loss of her son and the lack of support from her husband. Victoria also received little support from her mother. Queen Victoria wrote to her, telling her that the death of a child is not as bad as losing a husband. Victoria prepared a small room in their home for the small coffin, accompanied with carpets, cushions, pictures, and flowers. At the funeral, there were few dry faces. Prince Waldemar of Prussia was born in the Crown Prince's Palace in Berlin on the 10th of February 1868. His birth came 20 months after the tragic death of his older brother Sigismund. Waldemar's mother Victoria was overjoyed by his birth and wrote to her husband to tell him of how happy she was to have such a dear little creature to hold and nurse. Waldemar quickly took Sigismund's place as Victoria's favourite son, and Victoria hoped he would be everything his older brothers Wilhelm and Henry were not. Waldemar loved to visit his maternal grandmother Queen Victoria at her home Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, off the coast of the United Kingdom. Waldemar collected rocks and minerals that his mother labelled for him and placed in the Swiss cottage where she had played and learned to cook as a child. Waldemar reminded Queen Victoria of her deceased husband Prince Albert due to Waldemar's love of natural science. Waldemar was a spirited young boy. During one visit to Osborne House, Waldemar placed his pet Bob in his grandmother's study. Bob was a small crocodile, and he gave the Queen quite the scare. All was well after Waldemar retrieved his crocodile. In February 1879, Waldemar celebrated his 11th birthday. Little over a month later, Waldemar complained of a sore throat. He was diagnosed with diphtheria. Diphtheria is a bacterial infection which affects the mucous membranes of the nose and throat. It typically presents with a sore throat, fever, swollen glands, and malaise. The mucus can block the throat and cause the person to struggle to breathe. Diphtheria is rare in today's world due to vaccinations, and if contracted, there are treatments available. However, in 1879, diphtheria was not curable, and many patients succumbed to the disease. This was the case in December 1878, when Waldemar's aunt Alice, Grand Duchess of Hesse, and her daughter Marie both died of diphtheria. Victoria took all precautions known to help at the time. She washed Waldemar daily in a bath of hot vinegar and water, and changed his sheets and clothes daily. She would wash his clothes in carbolic acid. Victoria also covered her own clothing and sprayed herself with carbolic acid after tending to her son. Though he appeared to be improving, Waldemar deteriorated on the 26th of March 1879 and passed away shortly after midnight on the 27th of March 1879. Victoria was devastated by Waldemar's death. She wrote of how she would grieve for the rest of her life for him, and that she could not comprehend how Waldemar was no longer around. Waldemar was buried with one of his mother's nightgowns covering him, and one of his father, Frederick's handkerchiefs covering his face. The funeral service was held in New Palace, which was attended by household staff, Waldemar's teachers, and family friends. Victoria did not attend the funeral. Waldemar was buried beside his brother Sigismund.